Last Friday, on December 10th, was 95th anniversary of our church. Yay! Yay! Thank you. Yes, this is like 95 years, but the Methodist and the Presbyterian Church was built and established ahead of time. So each church has their own history, maybe more than 100 years now. But as a federated church, we are celebrating 95 years. So there are some people, I'm going to call Al, Jim, Kevin, Michelle, Thaddeus, Phyllis, and Eric come forward. The reason why I asked them to read our brief history is they are the ad board members, and then even though some people are not seeing them often, but they are working constantly behind the scene to make our church home. So with Ron Swift, please come forward. And Ron Swift, who is our church historian, and he helped us to collect all the materials of our history. So I collected our church history resources, and our church secretary, Eileen, helped to organize and summarize the collected materials. So we want to celebrate the anniversary by hearing our church history. And the history of our church is not only for those who were born or raised in this church, but also for those who have chosen and settled in our church, and our children and our new church family. So thus, this story defines who we are and what kind of church we are. So shall we listen? So, and whoever is come forward and whose turn, and please you just come and start reading. Thank you.
We want to ensure that each person is on, so you have your numbers and you know how far you follow. And as I move out, it will each be on the camera. This year, the Patterson Federated Church is celebrating its 95th anniversary. In honor of this momentous occasion, we thought we'd provide some history adapted from an article written in the 1990s. We owe thanks to Ron Swift for providing us with this historical document we are using today as we read our history. So now, hear our history. Imagine home.
Our story begins in 1911 when a small group of Presbyterians decided they would like to build a church in Patterson. Mr. T.W. Patterson, the founder of the town, donated the land the church was to be built on. And the first service after the construction was finished was held on May 2nd, 1912. The Methodist story also begins in 1912 when a meeting was held in the home of Mr. and Mrs. Charles Lee, where those present vowed to form their own church with a full-time minister. That year, they joined with the Presbyterians for a joint Christmas program. The Methodists were given a lot by the Patterson Ranch Company in 1914, and the building that would become our very own church was finished in 1916.
A strong friendship was born between the two churches. Union services that would be held in multiple years to help cover gaps in permanent ministers and both buildings were used for Sunday school. The churches held a series of 6 dinners in 1926 to seriously discuss the matter of federation and work on the bylaws. The dinners also served as an open forum for members to discuss their questions and concerns. The final dinner was held on December 10th, 1926, when 175 people present unanimously voted to join together as the Patterson Federated Church.
There were several changes after the Federation. Moving a piano between the two churches was a big job. Presbyterian and Methodist ministers were rotated until a decision was made in the 1970s that the pastors of the church should be Methodist pastors. There were other changes, and one little history, the Methodists had a 4-year rotation, and the Presbyterians, you had to do an interview, and there was a whole process, and it just got cumbersome and more difficult. So anyway, they voted just to do Methodist. Because the Methodists would supply the minister. Anyway, there were other big changes and problems, of course, but none so big that they could not be solved. Through it all, the church stood firm. Each church had organizations for women, and they were quick to reorganize. They were able to work out their problems amicably. The children continued with their Sunday school, and the youth groups were organized. All 3 groups were active, and after federating, each church building was used quarterly. The Presbyterian church was hard to heat, so eventually the Methodists became the winter church, and the Presbyterian became the summer church.
The Federated Church continued to use both buildings during this time, gathering the Methodist Church in the winter and the Presbyterian Church in the summer. This all changed in August of 1935 when the Presbyterian Church burned down. Wish you're giving me the bad news. It was decided that instead of trying to rebuild, the Methodist Church would be used full-time and renovated. The lot where the old Presbyterian Church once stood is now Mills Bar and Grill. The renovations of the Methodist Church, which included removing its tower, installing a kitchen, and enlarging the basement, were handled by Walfred Knudsen, who became a friend of the church. Mr. Knudsen spoke at the celebratory dinner held in the finished basement in January of 1938.
The church now dreamed of having a second building, a new educational and social unit. Progress was slow, with nearby land being purchased in 1944 and 1948. But finally, the plans were drawn and ground was broken in 1949 with a special ceremony. During the event, Mr. W.W. Cox formally authorized Mr. Knudsen to construct the building, and several church members representing the congregation, the youth, and the children dug up shovels of dirt. Then the project was hit with a very sad setback. In March of 1950, Mr. Knudsen suddenly passed away. The whole church mourned him, and the new building was named the Walford Knudsen Fellowship Building in his memory.
There were many other projects over the years, including the building of a new parsonage, which was finished in 1958, and the sanctuary, which was extensively remodeled, including the expansion of the chancellor's area in 1963. This renovation was brought us addition to our beautiful memorial stained glass cross, the stained glass windows, which were created by Glass Art Studios in Tucson, Arizona. It didn't stop there. Air conditioning was installed in 1970, and our redwood and ceramic memorial cross was added to the front of the church in 1979. We have continued to improve and beautify the church over time, the most recent project being the repainting of the buildings that took place over the summer. That repainting was funded by members of the congregation, and everybody participated.
A fall harvest dinner was instigated by this society many years ago. The dinners have continued through the years, and then the whole church has become involved. Several hundred dinners were served. This had become a community event, and aside from generating goodwill, serving good food, and providing interesting fellowship, it helped the budget. then as it turned to a big church dinner until 2020 before COVID-19.
Church history would not be complete without mentioning the choir. The choir contributed to the meaning of a church service. They gave freely of their time and practiced faithfully, not only for Sunday service, but for community events as well. Christmas and Easter were special times in the church, due in part to the choir. Their music was an inspiration to everyone. The choir sang at the church beginning in 1911, and it's fair to say that they contributed to all special events ever since. In 1988, the Bell Choir was started, purchased with memorial funds from the Florence Ralston Memorial Fund. The Bell Choir has been playing for Sunday worship and community events ever since. This is the only Bell Choir in our town.
Youth groups have always been a part of the church. In the 1980s and 90s, the Federated Mission Covenant and Lutheran youth worked, worshiped, and played together. They were fortunate to have youth directors who were on call to help them with their issues, to worship with them, and to guide them in their activities.
After youth group members graduated from high school, they still wanted to continue their faith journey together. They named their group the Journey Ministries. Our young adults keep their faith by meeting and sharing and praying with one another and seeking God's word while they live in the world.
There has always been a Sunday school for the children. They often participate in special programs that are thoroughly enjoyed. Christmas remains a special time for children, and this makes it a special time for the church as well. So does this year of Christmas. Preschool children used the Federated Hall rooms for several years. In 1951, a kindergarten class from the Patterson school system used the rooms for the year.
Was that how long? That's the first time.
The Federated Church has enjoyed a friendship with all the other churches in Patterson. In the past few years, several of the ministers have on occasion exchanged pulpits on Sunday morning. During Lent and Holy Week, many of the churches have joined in union services. For 95 years as one church, many great and wonderful people have worked hard and served people in the community. They have worked to help people morally and spiritually and have tried to uphold the meaning of the virtue of a Christian church.
Sarah, will you come with this group? Yeah, but Bill, you really come this way as I read the thing. This one is. Will you get mine?
I'm going to throw in one more memory before Al, because I was just thinking about it when we were talking about the youth. We should take my microphone. Thank you. As a young child, an impression that really was huge in my mind was at Christmas time there was a live nativity. And Lawrence Colding would make sure that they had a live burro that came, and the youth group would put it together. And in my memory, I don't know, Ken and Jim may be able to correct me, but they even had, the angel was up on the roof of the fellowship hall somewhere I think it was the breezeway.
Mary was sitting in the window of the fellowship hall and lit up. She was kind of elevated, because I know my sister.
Well, I was going to say, I just, as a young child, it was just a memory of just, I don't know, it was a very fun, and then had just was a live nativity, and people would come, and that was part of the youth group, and the community, or the church congregation as a whole would make it happen. So a lot of the outfits that keep getting used year after year for our own Christmas service and sanctuary here were put together, created for that live nativity. So they've been around for 51 years. So I just want to put that in there.
That's very good. And in this is our 95th anniversary. There just may be someone that has something burning about the history that you want to mention. Let's just give you that opportunity just to shout that out. Or wait for the next 95 years.
The youth
No.
group doing the Sierra service projects, I think that's a big, a lot of.
The current youth, I agree on.
Very good. Okay. Group, can you follow me behind me here so that we can be seen? And I'll just finish this up. We thank our secretary, Eileen Marble, and our pastor for summarizing this history of 95 years. Could we just give them just a little... It's so wonderful when we can commemorate together. And when we can feel the Spirit, the Holy Spirit, that has covered this church for these 95 years. It's wonderful to be able to do it together today. And I thank God for the opportunity that we are able to do this together after 95 years of blessed work here on this corner and in this place in the city of Patterson. The story of our church has been one of union and cooperation, where many separate parts come together to form a stronger whole and goes on to accomplish great things. Here's to many more years of worship, fellowship, and service to come. Thanks be to God. Thanks be to God.
Amen.
Amen.